Okay. One of them neck-bearded guys running around in his basement to get in front of the camera there. Yeah, whatever. You get what you get for free, right? So, just played a game of Byzantium. And this is the first look at it, of course. This theme alone was enough to get me interested in this. I ended up looking at board game bloggers' coverage of it, which maybe is a more traditional review style rather than a review of the playing that I did. And it convinced me, yeah, the mechanisms look interesting on top of the theme. Obviously, it's going to be a much lighter game than maybe I want on the fall of, the steady decline of the Byzantine Empire. But remarkably, I actually thought it does a pretty good job compared to, say, some of the games that I've seen. In particular, I'm thinking one other Martin Wallace game, which was a Struggle of Empires or something like that, which just failed so much in the history. It tried to go a little bit more detail and without maintaining any historical accuracy, and actually drifted further than this. One of the top features on this guy is the map, which is nice, very aesthetically pleasing to me, and easy connections. It's a little hard. You have to get used to, okay, land connections are kind of your standard, but then there's these naval connections and the desert connections. And they all have slight differences in terms of who can use them, when, and how. A lot of these little markers, at first reading the rules, these color-coded symbols, especially as just color-coded, especially as they were handled in the rules themselves, didn't really sink into me. But I'd say after a playing, you get a fair feeling for it. It does take a playing to get used to the positioning of the pieces of the items on the board, even just to grab that instruction. Most especially these player aid cards. I still was having trouble doing this solitaire. I think if it was just my handling my own, I would have had an easier time. But keeping track, you got 2 different armies on here, 2 different treasuries. Each of these has different values, and then you have your elites, your regular army, the movement point for your regular army, and then these levies that are sort of your pieces, your cities on the board, and their defenses as an alternative. What's especially neat about this game, I find, is the 2 victory point. The choice between, are you supporting the Byzantines or are you supporting the Arabs, and how do you maintain a balance between the two? We were seeing that already breaking down for the player who went the heaviest with the Byzantines, that they had lost, or maybe it was someone else, but someone had lost their ability to work with one of the countries anymore, and were very quickly going to be in a position where they had no cities, no means of supporting their army for the Arabs. And if you outpace one set of victory points by the other, by more than double, you end up not being able to score the lesser value. So you end up committed fully to one side or the other. More than that, though, you're losing some victory points. Right at the beginning of the game, you get 10 free victory points in each one, and you're throwing that away at the very least, and then whatever else you may have compiled during the game. So you do want to kind of maintain some power in both. What does that represent? I don't know. It's a neat mechanic. That's all it really is. In terms of the what kind of gets displayed on the map and what's happening, you do see the Arabs swing forward and drive the Byzantines back, but then they end up in a position where maybe it's a little bit more static. There's also that additional victory, the seizing of Constantinople and throwing the whole game into yet another set of victory conditions, which is just however many points you have sitting that you've collected so far for glory. As soon as Constantinople falls, the most glorious Arab, the one with the most victory points, wins. The alternative is to play out the full 3 turns, and that's not very long. We made it through 2 very quickly. I think this is just a couple-hour game, really. But if you play the full 3 turns, then your board presence, the cities you have on the map, count in towards your victory points as well. And that makes it a little harder to track because you can look on the board and see how many points you have. Component-wise, I've already looked at these. They're all very high quality. Although I want to trim this. Some good card, not just card stock, but actual board here of the same material that the game board is made of, which is also a sturdy. It needed a little bit of squishing together to keep it from pooching up. You got your coins. Okay, great. I'm one of the few people who actually prefers paper money to these guys. In this game, it's fine, but they're a little slickery. I'd rather have chips with some kind of rigidity to them so that they don't slide as much. It worked okay, but the piles kind of drifted into things. Yeah, your standard piles of cubes for a player, little wooden cubes, little wooden discs. Huge piles of wooden discs to represent the 2 different powers in the game, the Byzantines and the Arabs. And I think this was a really nice choice. It works really well in terms of segmenting things. The problem here for me was sometimes I would forget, and I'm sure, again, the more you play it, the easier it is. But you have your little army token. Sometimes I would forget, is that a Byzantine one, is it an Arab one? It's clear within the rules, if it started its turn in a particular type of color of city, started in a Byzantine city, it's a Byzantine army. But sometimes it's easy to forget things like that, just for me, the graphical and the mental capacity. Much, much harder to remember which of these is which here, though. This I had real trouble with distinguishing the difference. Not because it's visually indistinguishable, up or lower is easy enough, just, I don't know, it's really easy to lose track with my kind of mind, I guess. Again, though, I think that'll be easier, when you're only playing 1 power. Then you got a little pile of these are your bulgars and some extra chips. I actually got an extra yellow cube for some reason. I counted everything, and lucky I did that because otherwise yellow would have a slight advantage. The mechanism in the game of the cubes and moving them around and where they end up is really, I think, where a lot of the thought in this game has to go to. So you have them on your armies, but on your armies you have to pay for them out of your treasury. You have them on cities. Of course, you have a limited number. And you also have them to expend on your special activities over here, as well as taxes. All these places, here they stay forever, over in the churches. Since you have a limited number of them, it would seem like they've become a rare resource. They really aren't. I never really found myself not having some in my casualty pool when I needed them. Maybe there are ways of playing where you can really deplete your casualty pool, but I felt like there were always some available there. What was the limited resource was not so much the money, but the free tokens. The money allows you to buy more tokens, though, so whatever you have in your casualty pool, you can always purchase in. What you have in your free pool, that's what really limited the size of your turn, along with your cash, which can then pull more tokens into play. And making that decision, what you want to do with your tokens. Do you want to add to an army? Do you want to spend your army tokens that you've conglomerated in movement? Because by spending them, you've used up your army, not just in the sense that it can't move anymore, but you're probably going to take casualties as you fight. So you've got this kind of potential energy in a fully charged army, but maintaining that potential energy is expensive because you have to pay these constant upkeep costs on every turn. Now, turns don't happen very often, but you have to have a big enough city set in order to buy that. Now, the cities take tokens on top of them. And you're kind of seeing where maybe those tokens had to be expended and you're not getting them back. And if you do get them back, they drop back into your casualty pool. Just a number of neat little interactions there that you have to work with. But I felt like the main interaction was the victory point chart and making that decision of, especially as I got to towards the end of the second turn, how I was going to be able to sort of the first turn I'm just out grabbing cities and trying to improve my victory point and economic situation. The second turn I started looking seriously at, okay, how do I win the game? And at that point it became very clear that towards the end Red had enough of a lead in the Arab side that they were actually stretching to the point where they were going to be able to take Adrianopolis and maybe still win the game if someone else took Constantinople. And if they took Constantinople, they would end it right away. So you have to keep in mind not just the Arabs have this chance, whoever goes on the Arab side has this chance to do, as Red did in my game, a final strike to end the game. And it's not, to me, that didn't look like the rules kind of said this would be kind of the last grab for victory. It didn't look like that at all. It looked like, to me, what you would aim for. First off, it's the dangerous and easy route to victory that people are going to have to stop. And I felt like the game kind of, and its rules kind of led me astray there. So, speaking to the rules themselves, this is really the weak point in the game. First of all, they're done in multiple languages, which means I'm paying for a lot of paper, heavier shipping. Okay, not that big a deal with 8 pages of rules, but still, I'm paying for this multilingual support. There might be advantages, there might be disadvantages. But the rules themselves, in English at least, don't work very well as rules. I think everything's more or less covered in them, or can be inferred, if not, by another place. But they're way... they feel too verbose, is what I want to say. It feels like we've got these walls of text trying to explain what could be explained in just a little slice here and there. Maybe examples somewhere, maybe not, whatever. But I feel like I'm reading a lot. I feel like I've got these examples kind of integrated into the rules in a way that they just look like part of the rules I have to hunt through. So in this particular case, I'm reading the rules to the battle, and then the example's not very distinguished, so maybe I want to look at for what I think might be the last salient point in battles. Who wins and how they win. Well, what do I find? I find an example that's indistinguishable and start reading that and start hearing about Jerry and immediately I'm starting to say, okay, well, how do I find the end of the rules? And it's much harder. Maybe some distinguishment with the example, italics or something like that, would make it a little easier to ignore those when you're trying to use it as a reference. I've definitely found issues with Wallace's rules, and in this case, I think this is among his worst sets that I've seen in terms of not getting in terms of presenting them well. They seem to be pretty solid when you read through them all, but there's not an easy way to look back to find stuff. They don't sink into my head where exactly to find something in that wall of text. What is very good is this first page description. I feel like the rules could have probably been handled in 2 pages like that. All text, all dense, everything that I'm opposing here, and nothing else. And then they would have been small enough that even though they would have been incredibly dense and hard to deal with, at least there wouldn't be as much paging through to do. And in triplicate, it wouldn't be as painful, right? But yes, people need the colors and all that. And so the more detailed explanation gives all that, but it's very easy, as I explained in another video, to lose sight of what the hell the game's about. On this overview, I get what the game's about. I lose it when it's translated to this. Not every game has to do an essay as an overview followed by this kind of non-directed pile of information. Alright, so anyway, I found the rules not terribly useful, but then, well, not terribly good, and a pain in the butt to look up for something this small and simple. But then I pull out this set of fact questions, and it's just almost as large as the rules. Obviously, people are having trouble to compile something like this, but something like this isn't helpful. What really is needed is a rewrite of the rules. And maybe somebody's got that as well. Somebody, when I bought this, this was printed out in it. And frankly, I don't find this terribly useful. There may be some pieces of it that are of interest, but I don't know. Something along these lines usually is just too fragmented to really be helpful. If I thought I had real questions about the rules, and I don't feel like that, I would go in, and especially if they were organized well, I would go in with a pencil and find the specific issues that really are questionable. I've had to do that with things like Europa Universalis or La Grande Guerre, where there are directly contradictory rules and real problems. Something like this is an invaluable help. Here, didn't help too much. What I need is a rewrite done by someone who understands how to write rules, and that may not be me. I understand what I like in rules. Overall, though, I'm looking forward to playing this. I'm going to get my wife to try it. I hear it's a good two-player game, and I'm fairly pleased with my purchase. I think it's worth keeping an eye out for. See if you can get a reasonable copy of it, because, for a light game with kind of that military theme, but this overlay of an interesting and odd gameplay, because there is something interesting where you're trying to balance two sides against one another in your own victory points, where you're trying to keep in mind that someone has a potential automatic victory. It's not hard to get at all. All you need to do is trigger them damn bulgars and you have a good shot at pushing the end of the game. So like we saw in mine, hey, Red probably had less than a 50% chance of winning in the move they made, but it was worth taking. You can get the whole caboodle for one cube, so, a decent shot at that. Definitely worth aiming for. Likewise, we saw other players kind of trying to push their Arab presence, I think this would be the green player, into Asia Minor with the intention of capturing enough while Red looked threatening to position themselves so that they could take Constantinople and win the game. They weren't that far behind. So yeah, it looks like there's a lot of interesting routes there. I think the Byzantine route is probably more fraught with danger and less likely to get you a good solid position in the game, in the sense that it's not terribly easy for the Arabs to take stuff from the Byzantines, but taking stuff is where the victory points are, and the Byzantines have most of the stuff. So it just feels like you can gain more points in the long run with the Arabs. And you have this additional vector in attacking Constantinople to possibly win the game, which if you use correctly, even if you can't win the game with it, at least the threat of it might give you some odd J to attack somewhere else. Anyway, I think it's a pretty good game. I rated it about a 7 on the solo play. I'm interested in exploring it some more. Cheers.